The following production is produced by the State University of New York College at Oneonta.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Inside Red Dragon Sports. Today we're coming to you from inside Dewar Arena, inside the Alumni Fieldhouse, as we inducted our 2010 Hall of Fame class. And we're going to start talking with them today about their experiences at Oneonta. I mean, off the air, we've already been talking about how we've connected the generations here. We spanned 50 years in the college's history. So we're going to begin today by letting our Hall of Fame inductees introduce themselves, and I'll start down to my right with Mr. Jim Baker.
Good evening. My name is Jim Baker. I've been at Oneonta for 37 and a half years, and in that time I have been an educator, a head coach, and department chair and administrator for all that time.
Hi, my name is Dick Burr. I came to Oneonta in 1958 as a student, graduated in 1962. Following a year of graduate studies, I was hired to work in the college admissions office, and I was there until I retired in 1995. I've been sort of a fairly loyal and passionate supporter of Red Dragon athletics and athletes.
Hi, I'm Alicia Lang. I played on the women's soccer program from 1996 to 1999, and I'm currently back as an assistant coach with the same program.
I'm Brendan Heslin. I was a student athlete here for the baseball program from 1998 to 2002.
My name is Sandy Jones. I was a member of the 1964 through the 1969 swim team here at Oneonta. Probably one of the most successful swim teams that Oneonta has seen so far to date. But we had a lot of fun.
My name's Ted Bears. I was co-captain from 1963 when the team first began all the way through 1967, and that's about it.
Well, and Ted and Sandy were actually on the same team that we actually inducted today, the 1966-67 men's swimming and diving team, which had one national champion, Ted, and several All-Americans and SUNY champions. And why don't we start with you two guys, maybe to kind of kick us off with that kind of experience and being involved with that program and the team at that time.
Well, let me just relate to you something that I kind of got last night out of a discussion at the coach's house, is that when we were performing or swimming or whatever you want to call it, and accomplished whatever we accomplished, whether it was records or winning conference or being in the nationals, we just kind of didn't realize what we were doing at the time. We just didn't feel that it was that great of thing. And then to come around to this year and be inducted into the Hall of Fame, it kind of drew that into focus for all of us. Sandy?
I think it was a special time, and it was a special team that we were on at that time. We had a group of guys that really hung together. I know I came in, it was Ted and Ron and I pretty much were the nucleus of the team for the first year. That was like 1964. But we had really a core of people who really gave us the team spirit and pulled our team together, whether they were winning races and scoring points or whether they were, you know, we had a guy named John Orzel who was an art major, I think, at the time. He used to draw these incredible drawings on these sheets that we would hang as banners, and one in particular I remember was Rockport, may they rest in peace. This was after we beat Rockport for I think the first time in our history. And so we had an incredible number of firsts, being really the first viable swim team here at Oneonta. Swimming's changed a lot since then. I mean, at that time we had no swimming goggles, and I noticed we just met with the Oneonta swim team, and I noticed their eyes were not bloodshot. I said, "Is this really the swim team, or is this you know, are these what do these guys do?" So that was a big difference. And there's been a lot of changes here at Oneonta. It's just really exciting to see all of the things that are going on here now, and how vibrant the leadership is, and you've got some really good teams that are competing today. So it's just really great to see the traditions growing and growing and getting stronger every year.
Now, of course, big kind of a reunion for you guys. Some of the members of the team you hadn't seen in 40 years, and we had one gentleman come back all the way from Australia, and two come back from Alaska. So is that really what it was about for you guys at that time?
It was a lot about that. Yeah, it was one of the things that came up last night is we really enjoyed swimming. You really have to enjoy it to go through all the punishment that we went through over the years. And it was nice to see everybody again, and it was like we just had seen them last year or 6 months ago. And you know, this summer Sandy and Ron and Don and I were up at Lake George, up at Sandy's father's camp, and got together and brought all our scrapbooks and tried to sort everything out.
We had a lot of things in boxes, you know, no dates on them, so we had to say, well, did you really do that? Or was this here? And so we're trying to figure out, you know, what happened at what year, so we could get kind of a coherent chronology of what actually happened and when.
Now, of course, Jim and Dick, I mean, you were here during that time, and as we were talking, you officiated their meets.
They had to draft some people to help out. It was not something where there were a lot of certified officials around.
Right.
And
so what was that like to watch them compete, and what do you think it meant to the college? Either one of you.
We all had our white uniforms on, so that we had to go out and buy a white uniform. My experience was that they were just better than their competition. They were fast, they were skilled, they did all of the things that you want to do if you're going to be a winner. And they had that mix at that time. So they should be commended for their particular accomplishments.
The other thing that was interesting was the amount of student support you had. If you had a swimming meet that started at 7, maybe you went to supper at 5, and maybe you went and got a seat in the swimming pool. Even though all the bleachers were there, which they're not now, that place was packed, standing room only. And so that was one good thing about being an official. You knew you could get in. But you did. You had the support of a student body that was amazing. Every meet.
We had people standing on the balcony up, you know, just trying to get in the door and shoved down along there, and they would come down the stairs on the end there. And being in a swimming pool, of course, the echo and everything. That's
what I was going to say.
It had to drive our competition nuts. I mean, because you couldn't hear yourself.
It was very noisy. It was extreme. It echoed.
You would think you were in the Final Four of the March Madness or something. It was unbelievable. And I swam the breaststroke, you know, so you go underwater, and it'd be nice and quiet. And then you come up above, and it would be this, it was just unbelievable noise. It was great.
Now, of course, fast forwarding now about 30 years, both Alicia and Brendan both competed here at the same time. Now, you've kind of listened to some of the stories about what they have. What was it like for you two to compete on your specific teams and at that time? And when we were growing, I mean, this building was being built and changes were going on. So what was it like for each of you?
Well, I feel very fortunate, because when I was here, we were just talking about this before we came on the air, I kind of got to see a lot of the things built in the athletic department when I was here. This building wasn't standing yet. There was still the bubble air structure next door where the parking lot is. The all-weather track and turf surface was not installed yet. There was just, you know, a grass field with the asphalt track around it. And our batting cages for baseball outside were right behind our dugout, we didn't even have the press box dugout in yet for us, and now they have the whole locker room facility there. And my last couple of years is when we moved the batting cages out the left field where they are now, and just to see this facility and going from as a baseball player with, you know, morning practices in the bubble air structure in February, which weren't very warm, to then when that got leveled, having to go inside Chase and have our little batting cage in the little back, like, garage door closet area. We were breaking lights constantly when the balls were hitting the top of the cage and stuff, and not to mention all the, like, fencing swords and everything else that were back there while we were trying to squeeze into our little batting cage. And then to get this great facility while I was here, it was just outstanding, because we could drop a cage, pitchers could throw, we could have hitting stations in 1/3, and you could still have room for a full infield to be set up in here to get a lot of different defensive drills. For baseball as an outdoor sport, having a facility like the Dewar Arena to be able to practice in indoors helped us tremendously. For when we would go down south in Florida in March, you know, we weren't as far behind the ball with getting outside, because we were still able to do some full-length throws and full infield stuff in here and that kind of thing.
So just so people know, though, when they did move those batting cages, you hit them quite frequently.
Yeah, yeah, they were a nice target for us in batting practice and stuff too, to see who could launch some balls onto that and that kind of thing. But it was nice, you know, and like for me, having the extra season, because I had to redshirt my sophomore year. I feel like my senior year, my last year here, we had a very young squad. And I got thinking about that the other day. You know, baseball generally is built like up the middle with your team, and we had a freshman catcher, freshman shortstop, freshman second baseman, and then here was a fifth-year senior in center field. So I kind of like, you know, had to kind of be like the lock for us and our team. And I can remember at the beginning of that season, Coach Furchin had me batting third, and he had another senior, because there's only a couple seniors on our team, batting fifth, and our offense just was not doing well at all. And he called us into his office, and he's like, I think I need to move you back to leadoff. And I was like, and I want to move Bobby Kelly up to third. He's like, I got to get you guys more at bats. And he goes, we got to do something to try to jumpstart our offense. And we were an extremely young team, but we did very well that year with that young team. And I had a career season, Bobby Kelly had a career season. I think the two seniors kind of lead in those young guys. We, you know, we're trying to do a lead by example type thing, and, you know, just say this is the way we need to play, and they kind of followed our lead. And
now that kind of goes with Alicia, because Alicia, when she came, the women's soccer program was just starting to get rolling. Yep. But really in that 1997 season, when we finally made the NCAA tournament, I mean, that's really, from now, it's just grown. And of course, we won the national championship in 2003. So it's very similar. So can you talk a little bit about where you started, and you kind of were the beginning of a tradition here?
Well, it's kind of amazing. We got talking a little bit on air, you know, before we came on air, about when I first came up, I played on the original Red Dragon field, which actually ran the other direction. And it wasn't the nicest field. It was a bit muddy and broken up. And then when they started putting this in, we ended up out at the Wright National campus. And it was amazing to just start playing out there. And we had a group of freshmen that came in, and we just started to gel pretty well with all the upperclassmen. And even as we got older, the new freshmen that came in, you know, got broke in pretty quick, and it just started to develop. And I mean, once we got that first NCAA appearance in 1997, we knew what it felt like, and we wanted to just continue to grow on it. You know, and unfortunately, you know, my junior year, we didn't get it, even though playing a heck of a schedule. But then senior year, able to get back into it again, playing Nazareth again, another overtime game. You know, it's just a constant. And then to see the growth from where we started to where it is now, even being back coaching, is just amazing. So
for you, there's really a personal sense of pride being part of that first group that went to the NCAA and kind of breaking the mold. And
very much so. I mean, it's great to think that, you know, I had a part in starting this new tradition.
Right. And now you're an assistant coach with us. Yeah. And now you get to impart some of that tradition and some of that work ethic and leadership that you had back then. So.
Yeah, very much so.
Now, I just want...
I can share something about my first experience with soccer at Oneonta. You know, when we arrived, Hartwick was the big power. They were bringing people in from overseas, and it was just, they were national champions, I think, maybe a couple times or something. And I remember the first soccer game that I went to was down, I don't know what the field is called. Neowell. So we're sitting on bleachers, you know, and there was a handful of us sitting there. And we're used to rooting for football. So, you know, we'd see one of our players get a breakaway, and everybody would stand up and start cheering and making a lot of noise, and boom, all of a sudden they lost the ball and it was going the other way, and everybody's saying, oh, what do we do now? we didn't know how to cheer for soccer, so that was, and then I think, you know, reading newspapers later on, I saw where Oneonta actually defeated Hartwick. I said, wow, that is really something.
Yeah, so we've developed a lot of our sports, and we can turn our attention now to tennis. And Jim, you were the tennis coach here for nearly, what, 20 some odd years?
19 years.
And your tradition speaks for itself. I mean, never had a losing season, won 80% of your matches. But again, it wasn't really about, you know, and I'd like you to talk a little bit about some of the comments you made in your speech. It wasn't really about the great players. It was getting them to play together.
Correct.
So if you could just talk a little bit about that.
I always classified individuals as either great, good, or challenging. Most of my players that came to Oneonta were good players, but they could become great players once that they decided that they weren't always thinking of me, but rather thinking of we, the team. The air structure that was right next door allowed us to have an advantage. We could work year-round, and good tennis players, to get better, they want to play a lot. They don't necessarily want to play 5 or 6 days straight, 4 or 5 hours, but they would like to be able to play 2 or 3 times a week if they could for 3 hours. And that kept them at a certain rhythm that they wanted to be able to take with them into the spring season. And we always felt that we had an advantage being in the air structure, and they could hit in there. I've got lots of stories to tell you. We used to split the air structure and have the men's lacrosse team on one side and the tennis players on the other. And I have been hit by probably 4 dozen lacrosse balls as a coach in the air structure, not even talking about the number of times my players would be hitting a tennis ball and then looking to the side and then have to hit a lacrosse ball with their tennis racket. They ruined more strings and cracked more rackets hitting lacrosse balls than we did tennis balls. But these were the things that you had to deal with. One more thing about the air structure. There was an energy push. And I wasn't involved in the decision making in the energy push, but the maintenance department decided to install these yellow lights that you see out in the world today as energy. Well, we play with yellow tennis balls. So they put these yellow lights out there, and I walk into the air structure, and I have all of the balls and things like that, and so I took a ball and I threw it up in the air and it disappeared. I couldn't see it. So then my guys came in and they took one, they put the ball down, and all of a sudden they weren't having a good time bouncing the ball because they couldn't see the ball. When they hit the ball, the other person was on the other side waiting for the ball to come in, and if you serve, you won every time because the person never saw the ball coming in. So I instantly went to our maintenance department and told them that they couldn't keep those lights. And they said that they had a directive from the college that they were to have energy conservation. So then I decided there was only 2 ways for me to deal with this. I have to go to the person that makes the decision on energy, or I break every light. So we broke several lights, and we did get the lights eventually changed. So all of these are factors and situations that go along with Oneonta State athletics that a lot of people don't know.
Right.
So those are just some things to think about. So
now for Dick, you've been, I mean, you were a high school athlete, but never a college athlete per se that played on maybe any of these teams, but you have been I mean, you're at all the games now, you were at all the games then, you officiated. What has it meant for you to follow Oneonta State athletics then and now?
Well, I think you go back to the time when I entered as a freshman, where there were 3 varsity sports. The baseball team played down at Webb Island. And for those of you who don't remember Webb Island, it was down the other side of Neowa. Freshmen and sophomores couldn't have cars. So your first challenge was to get from wherever you were living off campus, because there was no housing for men. You had to figure out how to get down to Webb Island. The basketball team played in the Armory. The interesting part, they would fill the Armory with students on game nights. That was a big thing, to go and watch Dr. Chase coach. The soccer program was, as Alicia said, on the field up here, and that was really the only phys ed facility on upper campus until Chase Gymnasium opened. And throughout the 60s, we probably were not at a disadvantage as far as athletic facilities. But once the other colleges got field houses and tracks and baseball fields, it became more and more difficult to recruit the student who was also talented academically, who wanted to continue their athletic career. So moving to where we are now with the facilities we have, we're back in the game big time. And I think that makes a world of difference in terms of the attitude the students can bring, the players, the coaches can recruit. They're not limited to somebody who's picking the sport as an add-on to something else. They can look at people who have the academic skills, who also bring some talent in the field of athletics.
Now, certainly many of the coaches are longtime coaches who are here, Jim included, talk about you traveling as a director of admissions, working in the admissions office as an admissions counselor before you became the director of admissions, traveling with them. Some of those trips, I mean, well, I'm sure you have plenty of stories as well.
Let me name 1 or 2 individuals, if I can, and tell you how recruitment can be crazy. One day, Garth came in when he was coaching soccer, probably 64, 65, and said, "I finally located a goalie. We got to go visit him and convince him Oneonta's the place. Need a car, need a person to go with me." So admissions had access to a state car, so off we went. We got the other side of Syracuse and hit a typical snowstorm. Oh, it never snows up in the Tug Hill Plateau, but that day it was like 18 inches. We're already almost up to Watertown. And we say, hey, we're almost here. We've got to keep going. We're not going to get another chance. It's going to be too late to get this young man to make a commitment. We got to the community. The school was closed. So the next thing you got to do is find out where the student might have gone to, because they were dismissed early. We located the student, where his parents lived, and went and conducted an interview session. Garth talking about the athletic program. I was talking about athletics. And a young man named Jim Burr just happened to choose Oneonta. And I think we all know Jim now, as his Hall of Fame plaque indicates. He is one of the best officials in the country. He was also a heck of a soccer goalie. I think he still holds the record for most saves in a game, maybe not quite as many as you had, but I think it was something like 29, which for a men's sport is a lot of shots. And you never know where you're going to come up with something you have to adjust to on the fly. One other interesting tidbit where we probably couldn't do this legally, I was visiting a school on Long Island, and it had to be at least my 2nd or 3rd year because I knew who the counselor was. And went in and started talking and finished talking with a group of students who were interested. Within a few moments, she said, "Do you ever take a chance on a student who may not have done what they were expected to do in college?" And you don't know what's coming at that point. Well, she had a student who had gone to a big-name private college and left because he didn't like it. He was an excellent student and was on an athletic scholarship as well as academic. I said, "Sure, I'd be glad to, speak with him." She said, "Well, let me call him." So she picks the phone up, calls a student, turns to me and says, "Where are you going next?" And I told her what school I was due to. "Oh, you'll be driving right by his house. I'll tell him to stand on the street corner and you can pick him up and talk with him on the way to the other school." And thus, that was our first contact with Brian Lamb.
Oh, jeez.
So Brian, of course, went on and was a all-star wrestler, and he, as it turns out, he never played baseball here, although he wound up playing AAA baseball and has been a professional scout for over 25 years.
All right, and he's in our Hall of Fame
He's
as a
in
wrestler.
our Hall of Fame also. So, you can go through numerous stories about how you first met a student.
We didn't. He just wrestled.
Yeah, he was a great wrestler.
Yeah, he
Great
was.
wrestler.
Yeah, he was.
So you never know. You find people in places you probably shouldn't be. But
Certainly, as we close, towards the end of the show, I'd just like to go around to each one of you, and if you could just very briefly tell us what maybe your fondest memory was of Oneonta or with your team. So, Ted, why don't you maybe start us?
Oh my gosh.
I know it's.
There's so many of them that it's very difficult to just pick one out of the air and elaborate on it. I mean, if anybody ever asked me why I went to school, I always said to swim. And that was it. It was just plain simple. But I think the best thing that ever happened was I was going to go to Oswego until Don came along and said, come on down and take a look at Oneonta before you make a decision. Yeah, okay. And I came down, and the first person he introduced me to was John Orzell, who we'd met earlier. And I think John was one of the reasons why I came here. And I like the idea of a brand new team starting out, because when I was in high school, I was also on the original team that I swam for Carthage Central, way up around Watertown. And I like that idea of being able to start a new team again in college.
Sandy?
Again, there are just many memories that I could elaborate on. Just one thing that just sticks out in my mind right now, probably at random, is the nights before meets, when we'd all come together and try to figure out the weaknesses of the other team. And as a group, we'd come together, and everybody had a different idea, and we get in some heated debates on who's going to swim what. And Ted was undefeated in the 200 butterfly, but sometimes he would swim 100 freestyle, or he'd swim something else because we could score points that way. So it was that effort, before meets, was really an eye-opener to me, and it was really a testament to how a real team, can pull together to be greater than one person. That was just really amazing.
Brendan?
I think for me it was the relationships I developed with my teammates, because the amount of time, and I think most of the people here know, the amount of time that you spend with your teammates is just a lot. I mean, between practices and game days and road trips and off-season workouts and the camaraderie you develop with your teammates and stuff, for me that's something I will always take from my experience here at Oneonta, and nobody can ever take that away from me. So
I have to second what Brendan said. The teammates is kind of what helps you get here and keeps you here, but to also be a part of a program that kind of has started the success that we're currently on, and to now be a part of that same program as I am the assistant coach.
Yeah, that is. I can. Dick? Yeah.
not being inducted as an athlete, but as someone who worked with students, I think one of the things that probably sticks out in my mind is not so much the recruitment, which is where you first meet a student, but what happened after they came here, and how many of them would come by the office and bring their friends, and the friends might have been an athlete, they might not have been. But in the 60s in particular, we were adding programs pretty much overnight. Graduation requirements were changing, and you couldn't Google and get the answer, you had to know it. So it became an interesting mix of the people who came by and just the relationship you developed with the students, and I think to a certain extent we still see that today because we're on campus once in a while.
Yeah. Jim?
I think I go along with what Brendan said as far as my team is concerned, but there's another group of people that were very important to me, and that was what I called the stable of Mustangs that were coaches within our department. Every one of them had hyper type A personalities. They had no place to call their own facility, and we had to do an awful lot of constant change and manipulation of facility times in order to make any of their programs work. And by trying and really being as successful as we could with these wild horses was probably one of my largest challenges and yet largest successes out there, on top of the camaraderie and the family relationship that you end up with your players.
As a coach. Yeah. Well, we certainly want to thank and congratulate all of you once again. Outstanding honors. I mean, you're all well deserved, and certainly we want to thank everyone here for joining us again on this edition of Inside Red Dragon Sports. We'd like to remind you that you can check us out on the web at oneontaathletics.com. We certainly thank you, and we'll see you next time on Inside Red Dragon Sports.